Okay, so first of all, how are you? Also, can you like introduce yourself? So, when this goes up online, so people know who you are.
Absolutely, of course, of course. My name is Charisse Cooke. I'm a psychotherapist and an online educator, and I specialize in relationships and particularly attachment theory in relation to relationships. And I've been working for nearly 20 years as a therapist. And a few years ago, I wanted to bring all my teachings online to really help people because I think, particularly for relationships, psychoeducation is really key. So I've really been enjoying getting sort of hopefully information out into the world to help more people rather than just behind closed doors in the consulting room.
Absolutely. I love that. Like, it honestly, just like, also, I just want to say this. I've had so many people text me through like reframing news videos saying, who is she? And we
Oh,
love the content like she's been making. And seriously, thank you so much for what you do. So,
thank you.
actually, I have a couple of questions that a lot of members did like want me to ask you before and it's like a chill interview, so just don't like you can have a coffee, cigarette, anything you want. So. um, okay, so um, in relation to attachment theory, like, could you explain the different attachment styles a little bit?
Yes, absolutely, absolutely. There are four attachment styles. There's secure attachment, which is what we all strive to be, right? Which is we feel content in our relationships, we feel satisfied, and there's an emotional availability within the relationship, and so there's a lot of security, there's a lot of happiness, and conflict isn't sort of too stressful. It can be resolved. People are not going in and out of trauma response, if you like. They're not going into fight or flight. That's what secure means. For me, secure attachment is about being in a relationship with a deactivated nervous system. So we're not in fight or flight, we're not in survival. So that's secure attachment, right? Then there's anxious attachment, which, as the name suggests, is when we bring anxiety to relationships, and relationships represent anxiety to us. They're stressful, they're dissatisfying. We feel very unsatisfied in our relationships when we have anxious attachment. We're always wanting more. We feel unhappy in the relationship. We often overfunction. We can be a bit codependent. We can often also choose people that aren't always the best for us, that we're always chasing, right? So that's just a small amount of anxious attachment. I'm sure we'll talk more about that in a minute. Then there's avoidant attachment, which comes into two categories. There's dismissive avoidant, whereby people are dismissive. They're a bit offhand. They can be a bit rude. They can put people down. They can be negative, and this is the dismissive nature of it, and that creates space in the relationship. It allows them to have space. They need space to feel safe in a relationship. An anxiously attached person needs connection and closeness, proximity to feel safe. An avoidant needs a bit of space and distance within the relationship because relationships feel intense, they can feel overwhelming, and other people's needs and emotions are a lot for an avoidant. So again, that's where the dismissiveness can come in, where we're like, oh, stop making such a fuss, or stop being so dramatic, or whatever. All of those would be dismissive statements. And then finally, there's fearful avoidant attachment, which is a combination of the anxious and the dismissive, which is we want connection, we want to be in a relationship, but at the same time, we are terrified of it. We're really, really frightened of closeness. We don't know how to be close, but so we sort of avoid, but at the same time, we sort of want to have a relationship. And that's why there's this kind of come here, go away process in these relationships, right? So we're bringing, we're asking people into our lives and then we kind of push them away. So it's a difficult dynamic, and there's often a lot of trauma in this relationship. Those of us who are fearful avoidant, we have dramatic relationships, dysfunctional, addictive relationships. We make up and break up. It's often high drama, high intensity. They're very kind of big, explosive relationships. So that in a nutshell are the four different kinds of attachment styles.
Okay, I love that. Thank you so much. Do you could like do a little bit of like a deep dive into each thing and like, yeah, okay.
Absolutely.
Also, I just have one question. Like, okay, so
Mhm.
do you think like attachments like styles could change with different partners. Like let's say a person's not secure, but let's say I'm probably an anxious or secure person, but I'm in a relationship with an avoidant. Could my attachment style change depending on my partner?
Definitely.
It can.
I think this is what I think is really important about attachment, is that our attachment is ever changing and it's kind of fluid, if you like.
Mhm.
And yes, our attachment lives within us, but actually attachment lives within relationship, right? So it's a dynamic that's happening with one or more people.
Mhm.
So if we fall in love or are attracted to someone with avoidance,
Mhm.
the chances are they will evoke an anxious response in us.
Ah.
So we might be, maybe we are quite secure, but
Mhm.
then if we're with someone avoidant, by nature of their avoidant behavior, that could bring out our anxiety.
Mhm.
But likewise, if we go out with someone extremely anxious and maybe with a lot of emotion and needs, seemingly, that could bring out our avoidance to be like, oh, that's just a little bit much. I just need a bit of a break or kind of whatever. So yes, your question is right. It is different all the time. And it just depends on the relationship. So if you think about your friendships,
Mhm.
maybe we can have really secure relationships with our friends, or maybe we can be a bit avoidant with one of our friends, or we're avoidant with one of our siblings because they're just always like on our case about something. But then we feel anxious with that colleague at work who we feel, negative around. So
Right.
it is fascinating, how we relate depends on the relationship that we can have with the person we're in relationship with.
Oh God, I love that. So could you like do like a deep dive? And
For
guys,
sure.
if you have any questions, and like if you're too shy, you can drop it in the question like chat box as well. Just saying.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I think something that's really interesting about the attachments, I guess, is how they relate to one another, which is what we're saying, right? So it's all very well to say, oh, I recognize I've got this, or my partner's got this, or whatever. But what I think is more important is, what are we doing together? Or am I behaving in ways I want to behave? Or am I behaving in a way that this relational dynamic dictates?
Okay.
Right? So sometimes if we're feeling anxious, clients will say to me, but I just need to get in touch with them and I need them to know that it's all okay and this and that, or I just need to tell them how I feel. And it's I think it's really challenging because on the one hand, yes, we want to be able to express ourselves and be authentic and share with our partners. But if we are insecurely attached, we need to recognize these insecure ways of behaving. We need to take responsibility for that, because the more we behave in our insecure ways of relating, the more our partner is going to behave in their insecure ways of relating. And when we're in our insecure relating styles, we sort of feel very justified in how we're feeling and what we want. So the avoidant wants space, like, for heaven's sake, I need space. And the anxious is like, well, how can you not tell me how you feel? How can you not respond to my calls quickly? It feels very justified. And I think the difficult work is really recognizing to really try to stop the behavior that perpetuates the problem. It's kind of, being insecure isn't what we should aspire to be. We need to aspire to be more secure, right? So this whole like, I just have to step out of the relationship because it's too much for me, or I just have to chase my partner because I'm desperate for their reassurance. It's like, that's what I want us to challenge, because those are insecure ways of relating. And as long as we keep doing that, we're going to get the same results. So I think it's a very difficult one, a little bit, because we want to do what we want to do. And I'm saying, I don't want you to do what you want to do. I want you to do what a secure person would do, so you can develop that part of you, so you can behave in secure ways and become more secure.
I love that.
Does that make sense?
That makes total sense, but it just, I find it like really difficult because um I've rarely seen, especially with like anxious and like avoidant relationships, I've never really seen it like work out most of the time. Now that's a bit difficult one. Now you must have obviously worked with a lot of people like that. Could you talk about that? And do you think it's possible for an anxious and avoidant person to actually make it work?
I mean, I'm a therapist. I believe in change. So I'll definitely say yes, 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 yes. However, my caveat always is how we attach is on a continuum, right?
Mm-hmm.
And if we are with someone that is at the far extreme of that continuum,
Mm-hmm.
that makes it much more difficult, right? So if someone is so avoidant
Correct.
that they are just rigid and fixed in their belief systems and how they relate, if they are dismissive to the point of abusive or just emotionally unavailable constantly all the time, there isn't a lot to work with, right? So I think it's about recognizing that. Likewise, if someone is so anxious, they're inconsolable, and the anxiety takes over the relationship, and it's just endless, and there's too much emotionality to really be reasoning and problem solving. It actually just becomes about anxiety, because don't forget, anxiety, any kind of anxious process is about maintaining our anxiety.
Right.
We think it's to calm ourselves down and get our equilibrium. It's not. Anxious processes maintain our anxiety. So it really is about the extremes that we find ourselves in, because extreme relationships cause a lot of pain. And when we're with people who are very extreme, they will evoke us to become very extreme in our behavior. And then it's very, very difficult. In a way, how we can work on things and how an anxious and avoidant couple or people in relationship could work is by de-extreming their behavior. I think that's just a word I've made up, but we need to move away from the extremes, and then we've got something to work with. Then we have an amazing ability to actually heal each other, because of course insecure attachment is coming from our wounding, right, and our pain. So that then becomes something that's really much more about love than the insecure attachment, which is primarily about fear.
Oh yeah, it's all fear-based, right?
Right, it's all fear-based. That's it. There's not a lot of love there. Yeah.
So, I how do you think an avoidant person versus an anxious person could try to become more secure individually? Let's say we're not talking about a couple, we're talking about let's say they take a break. How do you think they could improve their attachment style?
Okay, I think, yeah, I mean, the dream scenario is always, both people are really willing to do the work,
Yeah.
but that's not real life. And, part of the avoidant process is avoiding working on oneself. That's a big, big part. When we're avoidant, we want to avoid taking responsibility. We want to avoid the messiness of life. So that is difficult. And that's where, I think people with anxious attachment can get very understandably fed up, because it's like we're always the one making all the changes and we're putting in all the work, and it becomes part of overfunctioning, and it is really difficult. And that's why I think it often starts with the anxiously attached, because often the anxiously attached are the leaders in the kind of self-help and self-improvement within the partnership. I think the avoidant needs to be convinced a little bit more. And so, if we're invested and we're prepared to do the work, and we're not going to be a victim about it, and we're not going to be angry, and it doesn't feel like a huge sacrifice, if we really want to see what's on offer with this person and want to give it a little bit of time, I would then suggest, for us, if we're talking about the anxiously attached sort of side of the relationship now, that we really apprehend and try to deal with the anxiety. And so we need a lot of emotional regulation. I've just finished writing a book called The Attachment Solution.
Okay.
And there's a massive section on it. The whole book is about the solution, what to do about it, right? Because we're all like, it's all very well saying I'm anxious, but what do I do about it, right? And so emotional regulation is so important, because what an anxiously attached person wants is they want their partner to regulate their emotions. So we're feeling insecure, we're feeling angry, we're feeling hurt, wounded, frustrated, taken for granted, all these things we can feel when we're anxiously attached. And a lot of it is very legitimate. That's often happening within these relationships, right? Don't mean to invalidate that, but we feel that. and we have emotion, and we have an emotional reaction to that. And because often we're in a relationship with an avoidant, their reaction is often very dulled down, right? So the more shut down they are, the more activated we become. Right. And so bringing emotional regulation in those matters is really important, because again, what I'm saying is that our behavior is becoming extreme. So we're going into the extremes. We escalate our upset, right? That's a big trap that we fall into when we're anxious, right? We work ourselves up. we complain to our friends, we think of all the things that have gone wrong, we really pour fuel on the fire, right? And that's what we have to be really careful of.
Right.
So emotional regulation is really important, and it's really hard because it's often the last thing we actually want to do is actually calm ourselves down and look after ourselves. You know, we have to recognize my partner doesn't have it in their capacity right now to calm me down. Actually, what will probably happen is they might reject me in my situation, in my state right now. So I have to take responsibility for myself and get myself into a calmer state of being where I feel more in control of myself. And then I can then communicate with dignity what I want to communicate. Because I'm not saying shut down your emotions and they don't matter. I'm saying we need to think about what we, you know, how we communicate in a very simple, brief, and contained way.
Right.
When we are, when we're activated, when we're in our anxious attachment, we are not. So that's the single most important thing. We've got to take responsibility for our behavior and calmly emotionally regulate, and then learn to communicate in very simple, brief ways. Because we're also, when we're anxious, we over explain, we write long paragraphs in texts, right? We want to have hour-long, 3-hour-long phone conversations late into the night, blah, 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 blah. And that is, again, extreme behavior, okay? We have to do the really difficult work of taking all of that and putting it into a really small, digestible
Right.
sort of container for our avoidant partner to somehow maybe digest, because all of that, the avoidant cannot digest that. The avoidant will get overwhelmed very quickly and then just shut down, right? So it's just about recognizing we can't just overflow with all our emotion. Our partner cannot handle that. So can we do it a little bit less? And then the next thing is for the avoidant, to recognize that I think that we protect ourselves through being a little bit judgmental of our partners, right? So we dismiss our partners, we judge them, we think nasty things about them. And because what's interesting about avoidant attachment is that it's a low anxiety attachment style. So that means they're not really emotionally in tune with themselves.
Right.
So they don't feel anything. They're a bit numbed out, right? When we're avoidant, we don't feel a lot, okay? And we mistake that for not feeling. And we think everyone should not feel. And why is this person feeling so much? And then we can kind of denigrate them. But actually, we're just detached, we're dissociated from our feelings. When we're avoidant, we are checked out, right? But it's quite a powerful position because we're like, I'm fine. You know, why are you making such a fuss? Oh my God, you know, it's like when I'm avoidant, I am detached from my true feelings, and I'll judge people who are becoming emotional. And the more detached I get, the more emotional other people are going to get. So in a way, when we're avoidant, I think we need to wake up to the reality that what we think is going on isn't actually what's going on, and we need to stop judging the people around us, because that is what is making the people around us even more emotional. You know, the more detached and unemotional we are, the more emotional they become. So I guess, you know, when we're avoidant, we need to recognize something's going on for me because I'm no longer feeling anything.
Absolutely.
What might I be feeling? And maybe I do need to take some space, but I'm going to come back into the relationship and invest and try to have a 5 to 10 minute difficult conversation, which is hard for me, but I'm going to try to do that. And then the anxiously attached has created a 5 to 10 minute conversation where they can say what they want to say, and then they might actually be able to communicate with a little bit more meaning and not trigger each other, which is what we always do. The anxious will trigger the avoidant with just being too much, and the avoidant will trigger the anxious by being too little and not enough, right?
Right.
And that's a really tragic relational dynamic that takes place.
Oh God, yeah. It just sounds so difficult even like to maintain. Now let's
It
say
is.
like how much space would be too much space?
That's a good question. I mean, something I always suggest to my clients, especially if they have an avoidant partner,
Right.
is to ask their avoidant partner, It's like often, we get upset and we accuse and we complain and we get angry or whatever, but actually in a quiet moment, it's really good to say when you need space, how long do you need? Or, when things are tricky between us, how can we handle that better? Or if we need to have a difficult conversation, how would you recommend us doing that? And they might initially say, well, just stop bringing so many problems, or, well, I haven't got time to deal with that, or whatever, or I just can't deal with it, or whatever. We get very overwhelmed, in our avoidance. But what it does is, I think it sort of keeps the communication constructive. It's not like you don't listen to me and you never have time for me. It's a, listen, what are we going to do about this? How can we handle this better? What do you need I understand you need space. It's difficult for me when you need space. But when you need space, what does that look like? Is that an hour, a day, a weekend? What is it? And then I go, well, yeah, I just don't like having difficult conversations. And we say, well, difficult conversations are part of being in a relationship. But let's think of a way of doing them in a way that feels the least, difficult. Let's keep it simple. Let's keep it brief. But, and that is unfortunately part of relationships. And then, and then suddenly it's not a battle. I think, an avoidantly attached person is continually waiting to disappoint their partner. And so when we are angry, when we're emotional or kind of whatever, the immediate thing is the avoidance thinking, I've disappointed them, I'm not enough. And then that's when we get the defense of, well, screw you a little bit, right? So it's kind of, there's a big process there for us. There's a great power we have for them to not be constantly failing in our eyes.
Correct.
And so my challenge is what can you say in a very simple, loving, calm way that, doesn't automatically make them the problem. Okay, because that is what we do. It's like these avoidance, they make our lives hell or whatever. And a lot of their behavior is difficult. Okay, I'm not saying that it's not. But if we're trying to have a relationship with someone who has avoidance, we need to bring a little bit of love and care. And if after a period of time, 6 months of a year of us doing all of that, and there's like no movement, then we know, okay, there's no movement here. I can't grow with this person. I need to make a difficult decision. But if we're wanting to see, okay, look, what can happen? What can we create here? Because I believe great relationships are created. You don't just meet someone and it's like, oh, it's perfect. Hooray, finally. It's like you meet someone and you think, are they nice? Are they decent? Are we attracted to each other? Do we have the same values? Okay, let's build a relationship. And you learn how to build. And that's part of, I guess, what I'm saying about these conversations about, okay, I can see you don't really like long emotional conversations. So how do we deal with difficulty? What would be the best way for you? And then they say, and it can be really revealing. It can be really fascinating. I'll do this in my consulting room all the time. I'll say, okay, how do we need to do this better? So what do you need in these moments when it's difficult? And we listen and we're like, oh, and often the partner's like, oh, I had no idea. Yeah, I can give you half an hour. Oh, yeah, that's fine. And then we say to the other person, okay, what do you need? Okay. And, and then we arrive at things like one partner just saying to the other, I love you, but I need some space. And so the one person gets some reassurance, and then the other person also gets their space. Or they say, look, we're raising our voices. We need to stop this conversation. Let's come back to it tonight or tomorrow after we've had a good night's sleep. Let's come back and we're going to have a brief conversation about this. We then become a little bit more relational in our attitudes, and that's a much more secure way of dealing with things. So that's what I encourage, is kind of how can we approach our partners not with a foregone conclusion that they've already let us down and that they've failed. And also then for the avoidant person, how can they go to their partner with a little bit more openness and courage and bravery to be doing something differently?
I love that. But do you think, like, let's say the anxious person has not really like called out the avoidant partner, but the anxious person is over functioning. Do you think the avoidant would take that as like, hey, I'm not doing enough, or is feeling detached? Like, how do you navigate that? And how would you help people who are over functioning in relationships?
That's great. It's really important. Yeah, over functioning is part of being insecure. So, and it's also a part of us getting a false sense of control within the
Okay.
relationship, right? So it is a coping strategy. It's a way of us feeling like we're doing something. It's also a way sometimes, as you say, of developing this thing of needing to be needed. Right. So we think, well, okay, I have to do something and then I'll be indispensable to my partner, or they'll think I'm wonderful, or they'll think I'm sexy, or they'll think I'm whatever, and then they won't leave me.
Yeah.
Right. So there's a lot of pain behind this process, right? And the real pain is that one of two things will happen with overfunctioning with someone else. The other person will just accept that as a status quo. And you will be the perpetual overfunctioner and overdoer and kind of run the relationship. And there are many relationships that do that, but it establishes a status quo, right? It's not like suddenly the partner is going to recognize, oh, so this is how you do a relationship, let me function loads as well. That won't happen. They'll be like, oh, this person just does all of that. That's great. This is how it is. Fab. Okay, so it establishes the status quo. It sets a precedent. So that's one thing that can happen. Or the other thing that can happen is that it actually repels the other partner. And they go, oh, this person's too much. They're too, they're just giving too much, and it's just all no, no, no. And they can, as we say in this country, you can get the ick. You can be a bit grossed out, or people, this is when the dismissive of it will be so dismissive and be like, oh God, they just don't stop. And there's always something. And so it comes from this place of really wanting to be liked, wanting to be loved. And that's not, I think, what it achieves. It just achieves us overworking ourselves and doing too much. And then often at some point we're going to get resentful, right? We're going to get really annoyed. And then that's what after all I've done for you, and everything I do for you, blah, blah, blah. So overfunctioning is something that I work on with my clients all the time, and we have to get comfortable with doing less. Okay, we have to get comfortable with doing less. I know it's really, really hard because it's about letting go of the control, isn't it? Because if we're not making things happen, we might see what is on offer with our partner, and we might see that it's
no working.
It's enough for us, right? But I mean, with a more hopeful slant, it also invites our partners in a little bit more. Because actually, again, if you think about it, if we go on the extreme, if we go into the extreme of over-functioning, that pushes our partner into the extreme of under-functioning. Do you know what I mean? It's like the minute we are in an extreme, our partner will go into the opposite extreme. And that's the trap we need to avoid, right? So we need to, again, do less, sit on our hands, don't just automatically take responsibility. We need to do less and less. And then as our behavior becomes less extreme, our partners might as well. It might stay the same, and then we've got our answer. But then, I always teach this. It's like we've got to start making requests for what we want. And we have to start again building a relationship. So we say, hey, I'd really like your support. Can you come with me to this event? Or I'm doing this thing at work. I'd love it if you could help me for half an hour. Or I'm exhausted. Will you make dinner tonight, please? We need to just get into the habit of just asking things of our partners all the time, because in that we teach them what it is that we need, and we teach them what we like. And then when they do something, we're like, thank you so much. That was amazing. Let me give you a big kiss. And that was sort of incredible. We're in the solution, not just in the problem. When we're anxiously attached, we focus problem, complaints, criticism, lack, right? And I'm saying we've got to let go of all of that and move into the solution. And the solution is us doing less if we're overfunctioning. And we need to start making requests, not like an endless barrage of demands, but just saying. And, sometimes it's hard for us because we don't, we don't even know what to ask for sometimes. But to say, listen, could you just hold my hand for a second?
Oh, yeah.
Or, or hey, I need a hug. Or listen, I'm going to go visit family and I'm really dreading it. Will you come with me? Or we need to start sharing what it is that we need with our partners in a constructive, loving way. And that is the way to do it.
I love that. And simultaneously, I do think even intimacy, like physical intimacy, is really important as well. So, how would you suggest like two people pulling away from each other could maintain physical intimacy at that time? Because if that's gone too, like it's just like nothing left, right? So,
Absolutely. And that's something that's quite interesting about the anxious and avoidant pairings,
mhm.
is that there's a lot of chemistry, physical chemistry there at the beginning, right? That's why they get together. And that's often why they stay together, because of that beginning chemistry. They really do attract to each other, and then they do what they do, and then they start to repel each other, which is really, really sad. But whenever the physical part of a relationship is kind of changing, it's because the relationship is changing. I mean, it could be because of external factors, right? Stress, money, work, family, kids. I mean, there are a lot of things that sort of impact our ability to be close and intimate and feel confident with our partners, body image, as we age, all these things all impact that as well. So that is major. But when I'm working with a couple that are trying to develop more physical intimacy, I always give them homework to be kinder to one another.
Okay.
Because what I've noticed is that intimacy is about affection, it's about warmth, it's about gentleness, and it's about trust. Okay, when those things are happening, we can have a great physical relationship, right? Yes, it's about passion and excitement and sort of all of that, but actually in a secure long-term relationship, we need to feel that the person likes us, respects us, that we trust them, and that we feel safe with them. Then we feel very sexy around them. Then we are really, relaxed enough to be sexual. And when the sex side of things begins to change, it's because one or both people have ceased to feel completely safe. And so that's right. So it's maybe I don't feel safe because I'm feeling maybe self-conscious about my body because my body is changing, maybe. And maybe I know that, my husband really likes, skinny women. And so now I feel self-conscious, so there's a lack of safety there, right? Or my partner is behaving really badly to me and is working too much and sort of neglecting me, and I'm asking for things and I'm not getting it back. I'm not going to feel receptive to having a sexual relationship, right? So there's a lack of safety there. So when, sex is about connection, and disconnection happens in the relationship as a whole. So there's something happening there. So I always say to people, how can you be kinder to one another? How can you be more considerate of one another? Because another thing that we do, and this happens a lot in our modern relationships, is that we're very self-focused, right? And even when we're anxious and we're sort of really fixated on our partners and all that they're doing wrong or whatever, right? Even when that's happening, the person that we're actually thinking about is ourselves, right? Because we're feeling uncomfortable, we're feeling unhappy, we're not getting what we want, so we're very self, and the avoidant, when we're in our avoidance, we're also very kind of self-focused, right? And that's not sexy, it's kind of, we lose that I'm seeing you and you're seeing me as exciting sexual physical beings, right? That goes after a period of time in relationships. So being kind and considerate to one another kicks in. I'm asking you to start noticing your partner more, to start thinking about your partner more, not in a anxious way or a dismissive way, but in a taking them into account. And then we actually begin to start seeing each other again.
Okay.
Right, because when we're living together, we just become domestic, and everything becomes boring and banal. Or when we've got families or work is kind of stressful and all of that, we are not in touch with one another. So we have to keep taking each other into account. And when we do that, we see each other. And when we see each other, we're much more likely to connect, and then that will naturally lead to something physical.
Love that. I actually, particularly when you said boring, how do you think, like two people who've lost the spark, let's say, and rebuild that little spark, and especially like, if your partner has ADHD or something, now that's also coming into question, like they will get bored. How do you think you can rebuild like spark in a relationship?
Well, that is a great question, and it is highly subjective. That's what's interesting. And so that's where our self-work has to come in. So when I'm working with couples or families or anything, I'll ask them as individuals, what ignites attraction in you? Okay.
Okay.
What allows you to see your partner as something sexual? Because we also now we see our partners as our best friends, as co-parents, sometimes as sort of, you know, co-workers, colleagues, but they're also, you know, people that we watch, you know, box sets with, and, you know, with, and, you know, whatever they are. We wear a lot of hats in our relationships today, right? A lot of hats. And one of those hats is being a sexual being. But for one person, they might find it really sexy when their partner is extremely helpful around the house. For another partner, they might find it really sexy when their partner is sort of, you know, feeling good about themselves and being active and feeling very sort of fit. They will feel very drawn to them. Or it can be, you know, they would just feel more attracted to them if there was a date night that, you know, ended in sexy lingerie or kind of something. But, you know, as erotic beings, we're very interested because how we view one another as a way of being attracted to them is very, very, very individual. So I will ask my clients, think of a time you were extremely attracted to your partner and there was a big spark and there was a lot of sexual stuff happening. What was happening in the relationship then to make that happen? Because something is missing now. And the clue is in what was happening there that probably isn't happening now. And obviously our relationships change and evolve, but that brings in an interesting conversation about what attraction is for you as an individual or for you as a couple.
Right. I love that. Okay, we have a question. Okay, a question.
Okay, great.
We have two questions now. Okay. A question about trust. How to handle lack of trust from one partner to the other.
Okay, brilliant. Yes, I see that. Excellent. A lack of trust. Okay, well, that is a lot of us do have trust issues. Okay, we bring trust issues into the relationship, or whatever's gone on in the fullness of time within the relationship has reduced our ability to trust. But something that's really important that we need to understand about our relationships is how we relate is a learned behavior. That means we've learned it from someone. So if we or our partners have a lack of trust, we need to understand, where does that come from? Where did they learn to not trust people that they are in relationship with, or people that care about them or love them, right? And many of us come from childhood experiences or previous relationship experiences whereby we didn't get the consistency, we didn't get the safety, there weren't boundaries, or, you know, there was just dysfunction or whatever, or our parents were inconsistent, all of that. That puts in us a deep lack of trust in people. And so then the question then is your partner willing to develop trust? Because often when we are distrusting, we don't actually want to change because we're too scared. So, but, you know, there is definitely something for us to do about creating safety in the relationship, because what we often do is we inadvertently perpetuate the problem and don't represent trust to our partner. So if we get irritable with our partners, if we are judgmental of them, if we kind of criticize them for their lack of trust, or we get fed up and all of that, that unfortunately is only going to create more mistrust, right? Because it's just confirming their belief that people are unkind or unfriendly or are going to criticize them or whatever. But the best and most important thing, if it is at all possible, is to go to your partner, as I'm saying, and ask them. Just say, I love you. I want to be there for you, but I feel like trusting is really hard for you. And I want us to work on this, because I'm prepared to do whatever you need me to do to build trust. And I need you to open your heart to me earning your trust. And what I'll say to my clients is that I would encourage them to develop bravery and take a small micro risks with their partners to develop trust. Because we've got to open our hearts a little bit, because if our hearts aren't open, if they're closed, it's very difficult for our partners to sort of
Mhm.
win us over. So if it's possible to have a conversation, that is what I would absolutely suggest. If not, continue being a safe person in your partner's life and think deeply about what that might look like from your partner's perspective, not your perspective.
Yeah. I think that that's like such an important thing. I feel like it's that fine line between understanding, hey, is this about me or my partner, or is it just me projecting like my past onto my partner?
That's right. That's right. And let me tell you, that is what that's all that happens in relationships, right? Is that we project our past and then we, recreate it.
Mm-hmm.
And so we need to be really, really careful. We are asleep in our lives and we're asleep in our relationships. So we need to wake up and
Absolutely.
become conscious
Mhm.
of what we're doing, because otherwise we'll just absolutely play out all the patterns that we've learned. All the learned behavior just plays out over and over again and nothing changes. And that's a big motivator for me in my work, is to open people's eyes to what they're doing, to develop self-awareness about what are you bringing and where are you taking this relationship. If things were to stay exactly the way they are right now, where is this relationship going to go?
Mm-hmm.
And so what things should we start doing differently so we can change our trajectory and
Mm-hmm.
actually develop something that we want to be in and that's worth having and is more about love than fear.
Oh, you're doing God's work, Charisse, honestly.
Bless you.
I see. Okay, we have one more question. Do you want me to read that or
Okay. It's quite a long one. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I'll read it if you want to read it out as well. In a relationship, if both have the same sort of behavior, yes, then in some cases, if I behave in a certain way, then my partner will also behave in that situation with the same approach. Yes, it's a little problem because I don't like what I behave in some situations, but may or may not, she'll also behave same in that situation. Okay, brilliant. That happens all the time. Okay, that is relationships totally. And so the challenge is we've got to stop doing what we're doing, right? We keep on doing what we've always done, we'll always get what we've always got, right? So we have to stop it. And this is where it's really useful to recognize this is now a pattern of relating. And that is what happens with all the couples I work. Someone gets defensive, then the other person gets defensive. The other person retaliates, then the other person retaliates, right? And we have, and this can go on for days, weeks, months, years, okay? It can become your whole relationship if you're not careful, okay? So we will, that's what I'm saying. It's like we're going to evoke behavior in our relationship. And then we also often kind of don't take responsibility for our past, right? So
It's just there.
they've got to change. They said that to me.
It's on the other
or
side.
that's down to them and what they did. And we've got to break the cycle ourselves, because if we break the cycle, then the cycle's broken and it's going to change a little bit. So again, this is about emotional regulation and learning better communication skills, okay? Because what that person is describing is what I would call reactivity.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, we're not thinking through how we respond and what we want to say. We're just reacting.
Mm-hmm.
And it's just relationship tennis, right? We say something that's just a reaction. We've not even thought about it. Our partner reacts back. We react back. The other person reacts. And it's just total reactivity. And reactivity means we're not thinking about what we're saying. Mm-hmm. We're just doing it automatically. And we've now moved into fight response. So remember earlier I was saying we go into fight or flight. This is fight, okay? And then often ends with a flight, someone storming off or shutting down or going and slamming a door or kind of whatever. So we need to break this pattern, and we do that by recognizing when it's happening and using emotional regulation techniques, and that's breath work or DBT skills. This is all, I've got a whole emotional regulation, a whole highlight reel on my Instagram with all tools to emotionally regulate. But we've got to calm ourselves down in that moment. So we've got a little bit of pause before we respond, because reactivity is no pause. Before the other person even finished talking, we're talking over them, right? That's reactivity. It isn't helpful. And that's just gonna become a cycle in your relationship that just happens over and over again. So the minute we pause, stop, think about what we're doing, think about what we want to say, start doing things differently, that is what we need to do. And then again, like I was saying earlier, another thing to do to recognize this is later, like a few days later, when you're both calm,
Mhm.
go back and say, we did that thing again. What can we do better next time?
Mhm.
Or what can we do to change things?
Mhm.
Or can we both agree when we start raising our voices or we start interrupting each other, we'll take a little time out for 10 minutes and then come back?
Mhm.
Or just begin a conversation that says, what
Mhm.
we're doing doesn't seem to be working too well for us.
Mhm.
Let's try to do things differently.
Right.
There's space to grow here. What could we work on doing? Because actually we end up saying things we regret or
Mhm.
behaving in not great ways, and that's not going to help us or our relationship. I'd much rather tackle these difficult things with a lot more love and a lot more intentionality. So what can, what can we do differently? I know, and it's always good to talk about yourself. I know I need to maybe stay in control of my emotions a bit more. I mustn't complain because I know that that's difficult for you. So I know I need to work on that. And then maybe your partner, that would inspire your partner to say something about their behavior. But then if you're feeling really robust, you could say to each other, what are the things that we each do that are triggering and painful for the other? And then we've got to be really calm, okay? Because our partner will say, well, you always think the worst of me and you criticize me and you never see the good in me or whatever. And if it's possible, if we can hear that, it will humble us a little bit and be
Mhm.
like, okay, maybe I do need to work on this.
Mhm.
And I will. And then can I say to you that when you do this and this, I can't handle it. It
Mhm.
is so painful. Or when you do this and this, can you just recognize that that is so unloving in that moment? You have to be, as I say, quite robust. And if you can't do it, you can't do it. Rather just talk about your own behavior. But you can get to the point where you can say that to one another from a place of love and from a place of let's grow. And it can be very invigorating for a relationship because it's
Yeah.
it's a moment of pain and truth, right? And sometimes we need that.
I truly think that's amazing. Oh, Roger, thanks. Okay. Um,
No.
so, but okay, let's say despite all of this, things is still not working out. Now, how do you know if this is just like a temporary, phase in a relationship? Let's say one of your partners are like in depression, or like both of you are in depression or something, sometimes that relationship does take a pause, but it picks up eventually. But like, how do you
Mm,
know this is like something you should end, or if it's something worth waiting to see if it gets better or eventually?
that's so important, because relationships can go off course and they can stay off course,
Mhm.
or life happens and then we can be with people and the relationships that we're having with them are not the relationships that we want to have, and that can become our life.
Right.
And I'm not in any way um you know an encourager of separation and divorce or anything, but I am, I guess, an encourager of working on your relationship, because I know relationships require so much work, right? Or just love and care, as I say, and that takes effort because we're so automatically going to go into fear.
Mhm.
So I think it is good to commit to people, but I also think it's good to always be growing as a couple, but understanding that there are many difficult seasons, as you say, and there are in a long-term relationship. I've been with my husband for 16 and a half years. There've been a lot of really tough seasons, okay? Tough, to be honest, they've been really tough years consecutively, okay? It's been tough.
Mhm.
But I think for me, there is merit to sticking things out and staying committed to someone. But also, I think as long as you are with someone who you ultimately believe in, that will do right by the relationship, I think we're in trouble if someone has a mental health issue or has such insecure attachment or has such issues, or addiction issues, financial issues, all sorts of things, and they have no interest in
Mm.
doing anything with them,
Mm.
right? It just becomes a fact of their life. That then puts us in a very difficult position, because it's like, we can't grow with this person. This person is really going to impact our life, and then we need to take responsibility for our choice in being with this person.
Mhm.
And I have a lot of clients with partners who have very, very, very serious addiction issues, and they've stuck with them, and they've gone on to have children, and their lives have become incredibly difficult and painful, and now we're impacting the next generation, and that's what happens. So, I think, I have a whole highlight reel on this in my Instagram, which is your relationship viable? And I give you all these reasons why it is viable, and then all these reasons about why it might not be. So go and check that out for more detail. But I think a really good question that cuts through a lot of the noise is, we can say things like, whether you want to have children or not, you can ask yourself, would I want any children, or my best friend who I love with my whole heart and soul, or the person you most love in the world? You can ask yourself, would I want them to be in this relationship full time?
Oh, okay, yeah.
Right? This relationship that I'm in now with this person, would the most precious, important person in the world to me, and sadly sometimes that isn't always us, it's our kids or our best friends or people that we love, or family or sister, would I feel really happy for them to be in the situation forever? And if the answer is kind of no, then it needs to give us a little bit of pause. We do have tough seasons, as I say, very tough seasons, and we've got to stick by our partners, but only if our partners are with us, right? We can't go it alone, and we certainly can't go it alone over the long term. If someone is busy with their work and very unavailable, or battling a healthcare issue, but they are seeking support for that or whatever, then okay, we've got to ride that out and see what happens. But it's when people are completely closed, they're rigid, they're fixed, they don't want to change, don't think they need to change, see no point in changing, then we really have to see that. As difficult as we have to see that, because often we bury our head in the sand and we go, oh, it'll all be fine. We have to see what we don't want to see, which is, this person is telling me quite clearly what to expect from them. Do I choose that? Why am I choosing that? Do I want to choose that? And if the answer is yes, great. But if we're in and this is when we can be a bit avoidant, and we can be a bit like, well, I'm avoiding this reality here. And so what would be the best, most loving decision for this relationship and for me? Because staying in a very imbalanced relationship isn't healthy for anyone.
Oh God, absolutely. And I love the part where you said like the best friend thing, like you put yourself. I really, yeah, that's such an easy way to like actually figure that out. But I'm sure like for you, haven't you like seen enough like clients with like these toxic relationships where they're like on and off again and on again and off again and on again? Um, do you think
Absolutely.
it's possible to like actually make it work the second time?
Oh, definitely. I mean, relationships are very unique, and I think never before certainly, I mean, we can really create our own relationships now, and that's what I find really interesting. And there's so much progressive stuff happening, with sex positivity and all these different ways that we can be having relationships now. And some relationships are quite volatile, and some are quite fiery and kind of passionate. And whilst that isn't, to be honest, something that I would want, I see that work for many people, right? It's when it isn't working and people are kind of staying in it and they're actually being destructive to one another. That is, as you say, that's when it becomes really, really toxic. But for some people, if we were to go to certain parts of Europe or whatever, we would be seeing lots of fiery, feisty relationships, right? And they're all fine. I mean, I think a big relationship therapy is that it isn't always about the conflict. What really separates, long-term happy relationships from others is the ability to repair. Right? So when you say, can someone work the second time round, I mean, I've seen couples work third, fourth, fifth, sixth time round. It's like sometimes we've got a lot of learning to do, and if we keep coming back to each other and people are prepared to learn and grow, then anything is possible. So we are constantly in repair in our relationships. We're either drawing our partners closer or we're pushing them away. And when we're in conflict, we're having conflict. And then it's in the repair that really matters, because the repair is about getting close again and forgiving and apologizing and then getting close again. In high conflict couples, there's just the conflict and there's never the repair. So over time, there's not, you know, the love diminishes and often desire diminishes and sort of everything kind of changes. So sometimes I'll be working with a couple, I just think, God, these people are never going to make it. There's just too much. And then, you know, 6 months later, you know, they're really happy and they're great. And then another couple can come and I think, oh, there's nothing really massive to work on here, and we'll just do this and that. And 6 months later, they're split up. So
Oh.
it's like, it's just a really interesting thing to observe. It really is about building something that you want.
Mhm.
That's what I've really sort of observed. If people can get on board with that, then anything is possible. It's sad because what often happens is that there's one person in the relationship that wants to grow and learn, and there's often the other person has no interest in that whatsoever. And if that continues to be the case year after year after year, you know, it makes it really, really hard, and we can be in these sort of quite empty relationships as a
Oh
result.
yeah, oh good. Honestly, maybe this is my generation, but I've just seen so much of like, okay, even when I take like the anxious and avoidant attachment relationships where the anxious decides, okay, this is not working, and the avoidant gets like the space and now wants to come back now that
Yeah,
avoidant had lots of space. And
that's
it works
it.
temporarily, but then it goes back exactly to what it was before, or it gets worse. Sometimes it does get worse. The
Yeah,
more
it
keeps happening to it.
aggressive. Well, that is the anxious avoidant dance, right? You're describing, right? Because the anxiously attached is always putting a step in, a step in, a step in, and then they eventually get annoyed and then they take a step out. And then that's when the avoidant puts a step in. And so that's the dance. There's always one putting a step in and one putting the step out, right? That's the anxious avoidant dance. It's really sad. And that is statistically, that is the most common relational dynamic,
Oh.
you know, for people who are insecure. That is the most common, the anxious and the avoidant. And
Mhm.
they find it very difficult to fully break up sometimes. They will stay. And again, you know, probably a learned behavior. Probably their parents had a similar dynamic, or, you know, they had a bit of a unsatisfying relationship with their parents. So to go on and have that in adulthood is not unusual. We've learned that's what relationships are like. You know, they're not always very fulfilling. They're not always very sustaining, and maybe they're quite high conflict or disappointing. And we just, you know, carry it on. But I guess we are going to be attracted to people like that. And that's where I'm just saying, just try to keep your relationship out of the extremes, because as long as we can keep it out of the extremes, we can grow and work and heal and become more secure in our relationships. I think it's a bit misguided. You know, some people be like, oh, well, I just need to be more secure. And it's like, well, you know, or I just need to date someone secure. And it's like, I think we are going to be drawn to people, the certain kinds of people. That's how attraction works. Okay. And that can change in time, but it's great. Just you're going to be attracted to who you're attracted to. See how extreme that person is, and then begin a relationship where more security can be built, or you can explore that, and then in the fullness of time see if more security can be built, because then that becomes a healing relationship where there's also sufficient attraction.
Mhm.
So, you know, it is complicated.
I love that. And like, I do find it interesting how, even if you're in a stable relationship, a part of you will always find the opposite a bit more like attractive.
Mhm.
I think that doesn't completely go away.
Yeah,
But okay, actually, could you tell me a little about like having a little bit of attraction for someone outside of your relationship? Because I do know that's pretty normal for because we're human.
absolutely.
Uh,
Yeah.
how
Yeah,
do you get that?
I think first of all, we just got to accept it as part of life. I guess the danger is if we sort of act out on it,
Mm.
because in a way, you know, in a way, we are erotic beings and we are alive in the world, and we're going to notice people, we're going to fancy them, and we might even develop crushes on people and sort of have whole things. And I think that that is part of being human. And in a way, it's part of being alive. So it's when we're really kind of completely shut down in life, that's when I think actually that's more worrisome in a way. But we need to be careful that we don't act out on things. You know, if the relationship that we're in is a monogamous relationship, if that's what's been agreed upon, then we need to respect those boundaries. But I think, you know, people can get really worried and they think, oh, do I no longer love my partner? I'm finding this other person so attractive. And I think that's definitely not the case. I think it's very natural to be attracted to other people, but we need to, as always, take responsibility for that and not put ourselves into dangerous situations whereby we might jeopardize our relationship, because depending on how intensely we feel the emotions, I think we just need to ride it out. We need to ride it out. I saw a really sad but hilarious and probably very true thing the other day, which was how to fall out of love with your crush. It was just something
Oh.
Instagram. How to fall out of love with your crush. And then the next page was get to know them better. And there's something very true in that it's sometimes the mystery of someone else, the otherness, as we say in psychotherapy, that's very intriguing, and when you're with someone and you literally live with them and you know what they're like, and you know all their habits and the home or whatever, there's no mystery, right? There's no intrigue. But with this other person who dresses really nicely and is really charming, suddenly, we can have all sorts of fantasies around who they might be or whatever, right? So I think just recognizing this is what goes on in life is really important. And we don't act out on things, but we can cut ourselves some slack that we find other people attractive. But the best thing to do is to go home and really nurture our relationship, and especially the physical side of our relationship with who we're with.
Okay, I love that. I actually remember there was this one post, I think it was a relationship study that you had, and
Oh yeah.
I remember something about a woman and a man on, like, they stopped having sex because and you were
Oh yeah.
open to interpretation, like what's going on. And I remember someone in the comment section talking about or was it the post? I don't remember, something about uh a person not being able to give sex into the relationship, and the
Yes.
other person having a bit of a sex drive but can't like demand sex from the partner. So when is that?
Yeah.
Then what
That's,
happens? Because you can't get sex here, and you start feeling bad for both parties here because one's not able to give, the other person does want it. So what do you do? No,
That's really, really, really difficult, because the person with the lowest sex drive will control the sex in the relationship,
Mhm.
right? And that is really, really difficult. And as I said, it's part of life. We're going to go through phases, if we are depressed or stressed or have just had children, or going through bereavement, there are many, many things that impact our ability to be sexual. And that's what I was exploring in that case study. And it happens to everyone at some point, and it is how we handle it. And it is difficult because we can get very defensive. It's a sensitive subject. Sex is one of the top 5 things that couples argue about, right? And I read a statistic the other day, which was something like 60% of people not have a sexless relationship, but have a very low sexually active relationship. Okay, 60%.
That's a
Okay,
lot.
it is a lot. So it is, for me as a practitioner, it's really interesting what's going on in our world, because on the one hand, we've got polyamory, we've got sex positivity, we've got people exploring their sort of sexual identity like never before. And then on the other hand, I have so many clients, like all of my clients, all have sexual issues. The vast majority of them are young, and the issue is that they don't have sex. So I've got these really young, beautiful, sexy couples just don't have sex. So it's like these two things are happening in our society at the same time. It's really, really interesting. And my advice for that is please work on it. Please work on it. Go see a therapist or read up on stuff online, but put a little bit of effort in, because what happens is sexually is there can be a shutdown. And as I said, in certain situations, that's understandable. That's going to happen. But we need to put the effort in, because that can just become a permanent state. Right, that part of us just shuts down, right? And that is a big loss. If we allow it to go on and on and on, it becomes you're going to become that statistic, which is in pretty much a sexless relationship. And if that's fine for you and your partner, great. But it's not fine for many people, or for one person in the relationship. And it is actually very important for us to be sexually healthy in our relationships, to be active, for our hormones, for our physiology, for our emotional well-being, all of that. Sex is part of that. So my advice is that it's okay if you don't feel like it, if there's something happening in your relationship that is like that, Understand that there are phases like that, but please do work on it and put a bit of effort in, because a lot of people shy away from it and then leave it for too long, and then it becomes a real issue. And it doesn't need to be a real issue, if you see what I mean. We can try help ourselves a little bit earlier.
Oh yeah, absolutely. And I feel like it would bring a little bit of resentment on both sides for sure.
Absolutely.
And it can be so difficult to navigate that because the person who has the low sex drive feels like they owe their partner something, and the person with the
Yeah.
more sex drive feels like they're demanding too much from their partner or making them do something that they're not comfortable with. So it's and it's sex, right? It's not like it's a very touchy little subject. So
It really is. It really is. You know, two of the key themes that are active in relationships almost the entire time are rejection and abandonment.
ah
And if you think about the sexual act, it's kind of the partner who wants to be sexually close will often feel rejected because they're not getting sex and they're not having that connection with their partner. And then the person who is going through whatever is going on with them, not wanting to have sex, often feels abandoned because they're not giving their partner sex, or their partner's only speaking to them in sexual terms, or whatever. And those are key themes in our relationship that can really keep us quite stuck. So to sort of recognize it's bigger than just what's going on in the bedroom. That is a way of someone not feeling rejected and not feeling abandoned. If there's just a little bit more conversation, there's a little bit more sharing and understanding, that will help the rejection and abandonment ease off, and for something else to come. Again, building trust, building safety in the relationship. That's what we want, you know. And again, that's also part of repairing. So there's like a lot there to look at, and people often just focus on the sexual act itself, and that is a mistake because it's so much more than that.
Oh, yeah, thank you so much for touching on that subject. And I wanted to ask you, okay, just actually a couple of questions here that the members did want me to ask you. Okay, yeah, okay, we have a question from Kushi. Could you advise on how to set boundaries?
Yes. This is very important because people don't set enough boundaries. Okay. And the first thing I'll say is, and I think that this is key, is boundaries do not need to be verbalized to the other person.
Okay.
So yes, we can, but what I find is actually more challenging is for us to simply embody our own boundaries.
Okay.
Right? So for example, if I say to someone, listen, I don't want to do that anymore. That, you know, that isn't right for me. So I'm just going to put a boundary around that I'm not going to do that. Okay. And they're like, oh, okay, fine. You know, in a way, we're almost saying to them, it's your job now to know that about me. When what I'll say to my clients is, yeah, you can absolutely do that. But what I would actually recommend is just, how about the next time they ask you to that, you just say no. That's because that's your boundary, right? So the first thing I always say about boundaries is boundaries are within us. There are boundaries, and we're not so good at it. So like with the overfunctioning is a lack of boundaries, right? Anxious attachment, lack of boundaries. Avoidant attachment, too many boundaries.
Right.
Okay, too many walls, right? So our boundaries need to come from within us. We need to, if we are doing too much, if we're feeling taken for granted, if we're feeling neglected, we need to look within ourselves and think, what boundaries do I need to implement here to mitigate against this? And what we often want to do is we want to go to our partners and say, you're neglecting me, you're taking me for granted, or kind of whatever, which we can do, and sometimes we need to, but it's actually more effective to go to your partner and say, I'd like us to spend more time together. Or I've arranged for us to do this thing tomorrow. I know you're free on Sunday. We're going to do this thing. Or, you know, it hurts, you know, it hurts my feelings when, you know, you're looking at your phone when I'm trying to speak to you. Okay, you know, boundaries are a way of being and a way of communicating that puts us out into the world and tells people what we want. It isn't like you're doing this problem, and so now I'm putting up a boundary. I'm not going to let you do that. In the future, just say no. You know, I think it's an important thing for us to sort of embody in our lives is we know what our limits are, and it's down to us to implement them. So that would be my sort of first thing, is like, look for where you feel resentful, taken for granted, neglected, hurt, angry, upset, anything that's created a negative emotional response. Look at that and take responsibility and say, what do I need to do to make this more easy for me to handle? And often, and often there are two things that can happen there. One is we need to accept the other person, because so much of our pain and upset is down to us not accepting someone for who they are, not accepting the situation for how it is, right? So there's acceptance. Yes, do you know that your father is like that? Yes, I do. So, okay, can we accept that? Can we remind ourselves that that is how they are? We need to accept them how they are. So we either accept them, or we put in some kind of a boundary within ourselves, which is, I need to make more requests, or I need to emotionally regulate more, or I need to be clearer with them, or I'm going to say no to volunteering at that thing too much because I don't have the time. So look where the negative emotion is, take responsibility for it, ask yourself, what am I not accepting, or what do I need to put in place? And then I often say, just quietly do it. We don't need to announce it to the world. This is my boundary. I mean, you can, but it's actually much better to just do it in a dignified way, to act it out in your life and just be like, I'm not doing that anymore, or no, I'd love to, but I'm afraid I can't, or, you know, please don't speak to me that way, or, you know, to simply live it, because that is keeping it our responsibility. We keep bringing it back to ourselves. And then we have to maintain it. We have to keep a check on it, you know, because sometimes we do it once or we do it twice. And we think, I keep putting on this boundary and people aren't noticing. We've got to keep on doing it. Okay. We've got to keep on doing it. And that requires quite a lot of self-esteem. So it's a very esteem building exercise to be thinking about boundaries that are, you know, dignified, loving, you know, they're not harsh, but they keep us safe, and they show to the world who we are and how we engage. For me, that's the most powerful way to be, and it's definitely something to sort of aspire to be.
Yeah, I mean, I okay, where this is a bit controversial now, but
Okay.
where is that fine line where you feel like this isn't a boundary, I feel like um I should be setting, and this is just something my partner should know. Because let's say like your partner's taking like less initiative, right? And you feel like, okay, I could set a boundary and be like, hey, I would love for you to take more initiative. But then there's that other side that is like, you should kind of do that yourself, right? Because it should come from you. So where is that fine line?
Look, I think there's this phrase that we have,
Uh-huh.
or this exercise that we have in therapy, which is the broken record technique.
Okay.
Okay. And it just means saying the same thing over and over, right? Because yes, obviously we would love our partners to just know, and they should know by now, or whatever. And the way the brain works is that we keep a lot of the information that we need day to day, we keep it at front of mind. Okay. So it's just there. And then stuff that isn't, you know, immediately needed goes a little bit to the back. But also the stuff that we've done 1,000 times is more readily available, right? So when we come to our partners and we're trying to introduce new behavior or stuff we think they should know and should do anyway, but but for them as possibly new behavior, we I would recommend to just keep asking, and not in an increasingly annoyed, critical way, just kind of keep asking. It's like the broken record technique. So I will sometimes say to the client 3 or 4 times in the session, something like the other day I said, so what would a more gentle approach be? And then well, okay, yes, no, that makes sense, whatever. So, but what might a more gentle approach be? And I said it 4 times in the session, and we eventually got to it. And she was laughing by the end, because she was like, oh God, yeah, you keep asking me that. And I said, yeah, and we need an answer at some point, or whatever. But it's just if we aren't so inclined, we do need lots and lots and lots of repetition. And I think it's our job to not fall into the trap of becoming disappointed and disillusioned and angry and sort of fed up, unless that's, coinciding with behavior that is rude or abusive or destructive or unkind. If your partner is just being human and not behaving in ways that you ideally would like them to, then welcome to the world of relationships. That's what it's going to be like a lot of the time. So just keep asking, you want to leave 5 minutes early, you'll probably be saying, let's leave 5 minutes early for like the next 10 years of your life in this relationship with this person. And, you can ask yourself, is that okay? Can I accept that? It's like, yeah. But I think the danger is that if we expect to be disappointed by our partners, we will set them up to fail. And these are ways that we set them up to fail, when we want them to do things that don't naturally come to them, that we feel that they should, but they don't. And then that allows us to be disappointed over and over again. And that is going to keep us in our insecure ways of relating. And we also then tend to over focus on what they don't do and under focus on what they do, right? And then we're in dangerous territory there of becoming, and then, our partners will start saying things like they can never win with us, nothing they ever do is right, they're never enough, etc., etc. And then that's when we're really going to get into trouble. And then we'll probably evoke a bit of avoidance in our partners because we're going into the you're disappointing me process, right? So we need to be careful. It's like, be irritated by stuff, but also spend a lot of time noticing the good. That is always the biggest tool that we can use. Okay, but what are they doing right? What do they give you? Because sometimes we just ignore it and we focus on the things that they're not, and that is a big mistake.
Oh God, absolutely. Okay. I think we have a question. I'm so sorry, Miss Alyash. Oh, Rohan, how to deal with tragic memories? It keeps coming in a way.
Tragic memories.
I'm not too sure if he means like within the relationship, or
Deal with tragic memories. It keeps coming in a way. I mean, something I often say is, I say we do a lot of grieving in relationships. When we're in relationships, it reminds us of previous relationships, or because if we are safely with someone, then it sort of allows our emotions to come out more, and sometimes memories come back to us, and that's okay. And it can feel strange that we're sort of with this person and then we're having these memories of previously in the relationship or other relationships or other people or different parts of our life, and that is grief. And this is something that we don't really talk about enough as humans, is that we're always grieving. Our lives are moving and changing so fast, and endings and change bring grief. And none of us have time to grieve. We don't have time to process endings, to reconcile things within ourselves, to psychically and emotionally come to terms with things. And so there is often a lot of grief, and that's often when we drink too much or work too much or do other behaviors or whatever. We're often dealing with difficult feelings, and a lot of difficult feelings are around grief. And we've all had our hearts broken, we've all had difficulties at work, we've all had hard experiences in our life, and we're grieving them all the time. So even though it might be a bit strange and alarming that we're having these memories, when that's happening, we need to look after ourselves. There's a bit of pain is coming up, a bit of grief. We need to not like reject that part of us and push it away, embrace it, maybe take a little bit of time, spend some time looking after yourself, giving those memories a little bit more room, and then spending time with them, and then letting them go, and then getting refocused in your relationship. But I think bring compassion to the situation that you're grieving, or these memories are coming back, and that's okay. Let them be. They will come and then they will go again, and we don't need to be too alarmed about it.
Okay. Yeah. I hope that answers the question, Rohan. Okay, so
okay, I'm gonna have to go in a few minutes if that's okay.
I was literally just gonna say, I have the last question at the end there.
Okay.
So okay, so as a therapist yourself, right? How do you maintain a relationship with your partner, because that therapist partner dynamic starts coming in? Like, do you think do you not like tap in where you're like, okay, am I being like a therapist or am I being a partner right
Um,
now?
I suppose inevitably, yeah, I suppose.
Uh-huh.
Maybe, yeah, maybe especially early in the relationship. And I mean, for me, I am a person first and then a therapist second.
Mhm.
But what therapy has afforded me is a lot of stuff that I teach, which is compassion,
Mhm.
non-judgment, and acceptance.
Mm.
And being in a personal relationship, I know how difficult all those things are, right?
Mm.
But I know the importance of it. So I've been able to bring that to my relationship. And
Ah,
so whilst I'm not sort of therapying him, although I'd lie if I say I wasn't, I don't sometimes do that. And my husband he isn't a therapist like me, but he's a trainer and works with teams or whatever. So we're both kind of similar. So we're very interested in human psychology and stuff like that.
yeah, yeah.
So we're able to have these conversations, I guess. But without these tools of focusing on love, being gentle, being kind, giving someone the benefit of the doubt. These are all things that I teach,
Mhm.
and they really, really matter to me. And they matter to me as a professional. And now, having been in such a long-term relationship, I know how important they are in
Absolutely.
my personal life. So kind of my personal life and my professional life have really fed into everything I teach and everything I know. So yeah, I mean, yeah, my whole family, we're all a bunch of therapists now, I suppose, because we all use the language and we all sort of talk about it and we're all interested in it. And that is a gift because there is a lot of wisdom there. So whilst I don't want to disrespect anyone by being anyone's therapist, from a place of love, we can all use the principles and take what we can from them and hopefully be stronger as a family.
Absolutely. Oh my God. We're gonna edit here, but we have one comment view. Um, should I read that out because it's very wholesome, honestly.
Okay.
You're very
No.
generous in the content and you
Thank you. Oh, that's so sweet. Thank you. Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, I've written a book. I'm so excited. I don't know how I did it. But anyway, I wrote a book and it's called The Attachment Solution. It's what I wish I had like a couple of decades ago. I just talked through all the unhelpful behavior that we do in our behavior, and I really, in a way, I call you out on sort of all the behaviors that we do, anxious as an avoidant. All of that is like, hey, boom, 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 here it is.
Mm.
And then the whole book is about the solution, right? It's about what to do, the tools you need to use, the skills to develop, the traps you can fall into. And then there are whole chapters on relational dynamics. So like the anxious avoidant dance, the avoidant partnership, the anxious partnership. So I take you through all of that, what to do if you're in relationships like that. And so that's available for pre-order now on Amazon, but it's unfortunately only coming out in February, I'm afraid.
Okay. But no worries, I will be promoting that so much. And I'm gonna be buying the book as well.
Thank you.
I will
Thank
on
you.
the members group and trying to promote that as much as I can. Thank you so much for
Oh,
being
thank
here
you
today.
so much. I've really enjoyed our conversation. Thank you so much for arranging and thank you for asking me.
And have a lovely day. And thank you to everyone
Thank
who's
you. You too.
okay. See
Mwah, mwah. Lots of love.
you.
Bye.